Good afternoon, Dr. Ziefel. This is probably my 8th or 9th take of this thing. We had a good one going with our camera from home, but the battery went dead at the 11-minute mark. Fortunately, Ashley over here at the College of Education had a spare little digital camera, so we're using it. This is my final project, the summative for week 8. This is our last one. I have decided a couple things. One is that I'm definitely going to get a pad. I like to move around and can't really do it that much with paper, so I'd like to have a pad that will slide around. And the other thing is I just want to make sure I charge batteries before I do video on our camera. Wife was making funny faces because she noticed the battery, the little red light was flashing. So anyways, here we go. This is on the prodigal son, Luke chapter 15. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear him. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Then Jesus told him this parable. We're going to skip down to verse 11. Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After a time, after he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him out to the fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired men have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard the music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. 'Your brother has come,' he replied, 'and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound.' The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So the father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, 'Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him.' 'My son,' the father said, 'you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.'" This story in Luke chapter 15 is a parable. Jesus often used parables or a story to get his point across. In this instance, the sinners and tax collectors were gathering around him, which was often the case. But on the outskirts of the fringe of the group, or off to the side, wherever they were, the Pharisees, who were the religious leaders of the day, were off the side and muttering. They were complaining about Jesus hanging out with tax collectors and sinners. Kind of give you an idea what their attitude might have been like. We can go over to James chapter 2 and read verses 2 through 4. "So suppose a man wearing a gold ring and fine clothes, and a poor man in shabby clothes comes into your meeting. If you show special attention to the man wearing fine clothes and say, 'Here's a good seat for you,' but say to the poor man, 'Why don't you stand over here, or maybe at my feet,' Have you not discriminated among yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts? This was the attitude of the Pharisees that was going on. This is a story. The story of three. The father, the younger brother, the older brother. What's really interesting is that over the years, we may have missed out on the greatest part of this story. We're going to start this story with the younger brother. Almost immediately in this parable, the younger brother asks for his share of the estate. The father willingly gives it to him. A few days later, he gathers all his belongings, everything he has, and he leaves. This is an indication that he's not coming back. Now, me as an 18-year-old, I actually kind of went through the same thing with my dad. I didn't have a big estate to get from him, but I had my stuff, and I gathered my stuff, and I went off to house sit for some folks I knew. And my father asked me if I intended on coming back, and I said no. He goes off to a far-off country. He spends every penny of that wealth on wild living. Then things go bad. A famine hits the whole country. He goes hungry. He has to hire himself out to a pig farmer. He actually becomes jealous of the pods that the pigs were getting because he wasn't getting anything. But he comes to his senses. He practices a speech. Father, I've sinned against heaven and I've sinned against you. He practices for a while and he heads home, back to his father. Remember when we were kids and hearing the story in Sunday school? Who was the focus on? The younger brother. But what about the older brother in the story? With the younger brother's return, the elder brother becomes angry and indignant towards the younger brother and the father. He doesn't even go down to the house. He hears the music and the dancing, and he asks the servant what's going on. He becomes angry. The Greek is orgizo, which means he was full of wrath. He's burned up with passion. This dude was hot, ticked off. The father comes out to him, and he basically scolds the father. He's very disrespectful to the father's position. He says, look, I have slaved and obeyed. Further on, he says, this son of yours. Twice he disrespects the father in just a short area. But that second time, you can tell he's not even acknowledging the younger brother as his brother. Basically, he's throwing a temper tantrum. He had slaved away and obeyed his father all those years. But why? It's fairly simple. It was for his father's wealth and not the father. Can we compare this attitude with us today? No, not everybody has this attitude. But there are times that each of us are wondering what we can get out of the deal. Now, legalism comes to mind a little bit here, but we're going to save that for another day. The question I have at the moment here is, how do we treat those who have turned their hearts back to Christ? Have you ever asked yourself if you've had this attitude? Are you the hardened-hearted brother who has obeyed all your life for what you can get from the Father? Or do you obey out of love for the Father? To get the whole story, let's move to the Father and his response to his son's rebellion. So, the Father, he is the patriarch of this family. His position demands respect. It is a position of status, and there are protocols that are supposed to be maintained with that status. As we're going to see here, the father sets that status aside. Now, the younger brother had come to his senses and he came home, but while he was still a far way off, the father saw him, and he runs to the younger brother. The patriarchs of the family just didn't do this. Can you imagine an older gentleman, maybe somebody my age, with a robe on, pulling up the front of the rope so they can run to the brother, the younger brother. But he doesn't stop there. He throws his arms around him and gives him a big hug, and he kisses him. That's not dignified. But yet he doesn't stop there either. He tells the servant to get a robe and put it on him, get a ring and put it on his hand, put sandals on his feet. These are articles of restoration. The father was bringing him back into the family. They got a fattened calf to celebrate. This is reserved for distinguished guests or special occasions. Yes, this was a special occasion. There was a feast and celebration. Basically, it was party central with music and dancing. The father had compassion for the younger brother. We can also think about he had forgiveness, he had love, he had mercy. He was showing favor to the younger brother. The other side of this is the older brother. The father also sets aside his status to go out to the older brother. He pleads with the older brother. He drops his pride and patiently takes the disrespect that the older brother is saying to him. The son, though they were supposed to say father, like the younger brother did, even when he was asking for the estate, he said, Father, give me what's mine. But the older brother didn't do that. He was very disrespectful, saying, look. And then he did it again, saying, this son of yours, not acknowledging that this was still his brother. The father patiently takes the disrespect. He calmly explains his reasoning. He sought out the older brother. Which of the three family members might you be? Father, younger brother, or older brother? This parable has no conflict resolution, but it shows how God seeks after those he loves. He shows us his love and his willingness to give up what is rightfully his. Something that comes to mind, a great example is Christ on the cross. We can look at John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave. Every gospel talks about how Jesus willingly gave up his position for us. Jesus is our example of the Father in the story and should be the focus of our behavior. As Christians, we have choices to make. We can and often are like either son. Remember, the younger son rebelled, left, took what was his, but repented. The younger brother stayed with the father and obeyed him, but not for the love of the father, but for the father's estate. We're supposed to follow the example of the father, who gave up his rights, his position, his status for both of his rebellious sons. So why do we do good works? I must admit there's times that I have done works or stuff for things. But I also get asked this question a lot: why do I do the things that I do? I do them because I love God. I know what he's done for me. He has set aside his deity, his status as God for me. I don't want his estate. I'd be happy sweeping the streets, or if the animals do poop up there, I'll scoop poop. I don't care. I just want to be with my Lord. This is a story of three, not just one. It's imperative we be like the father and go after the younger son and prayerfully reason with the older brother. If you don't get anything else out of this today, please get this. This parable of the lost son tells about the younger and the older brother, but it may be more about God's willingness to give up his majesty to pursue those he loves. Let's pray.